Okay, this is the next part of our Into the Jungle. It's the story about Bagheera and his sister, and if you remember, they've escaped from their cages and they're out in the jungle now. The next 4 moon cycles passed in a blur of joy and eating. They went far into the jungle, tasting, smelling, seeing, and feeling new things. Hunting was not at first easy. Time after time, Bagheera overshot his pounce and ended up wrapping his claws around a tuft of grass or his own ears. Gilari learned to pounce the pounce faster, but it took her some time not to wake up roaring in the night. Her hackles raised along her back, staring around wildly for the palace guards. They began to know the other creatures. They learned very fast, and in Bagheera's case, painfully, to respect the slow beauty of the elephants. And Gilari fell in love with the sloth bears, with their clumsiness and their kindness and their fondness for fish, which if she waited long enough, staring pointedly, they would sometimes share with her. They learned to tell the wolves apart, one from another. They learned no 2 animals are identical. To be alive, Bagheera found, was to be wild and various. Bagheera found a cave for the 2 of them to sleep in, deep in the heart of the jungle. It was wide at the back with a very narrow mouth that Bagheera himself could only just squeeze through. Both siblings had been raised to sleep at night and awake during the day, so they would be awake if the royal family wanted to parade past and stare at them. But very slowly, they began to adapt to sleeping during the heat of the sun and waking to hunt at dusk. That's a beautiful picture there. The jungle at night shone gold and silver and deep water blue. On the 5th moon cycle of their freedom, though, the jungle began to change. The sun grew hot. It seemed to swell in size until it filled the whole sky, and there was no blue, only the white hot surge of light. The animals of the jungle grew slower. They began to trip and fall as they ran. Even the wolves, usually the most sure-footed of animals, could be seen to stumble and halt as they hunted. Gilari lay down in the cave and closed her eyes. "At home," she said. "They gave us clean water every day." "Don't call it home, Gilari," said Bagheera. "It was never home." Gilari butted her head against his, too exhausted to speak, and crept to the back of the cave where the air was coolest. Bagheera hauled himself out of the cave, up from their rock, and leapt up into the trees. From there he surveyed the land. The sun was killing the jungle. All the great green life of it was burning brown. A pack of wolves lay in the shade of a rock, too weak to reach their own cave. As Bagheera watched, a mouse skittered over the eyelid of one of the largest wolves, who made no move, too thirsty and thin to open her jaws. To the north there was a great expanse of mud, marking what had once been a lake. "You, Panther, can you see a rock there in the middle of the pool?" Bagheera whipped round to see who had spoken. A bear, a very old bear, sat at the foot of the tree. He was, thought Bagheera, though Bagheera did not know it then, Baloo's great-grandfather. "Yes," said Bagheera. He was still wary of the other jungle animals, not yet knowing whom to trust. But the old bear had gentle eyes and so many flecks of white on his muzzle and back that he seemed to be almost albino. "I see it." "Is it covered by water or is it dry?" Bagheera squinted in the sun. "It's bone dry." The bear nodded solemnly. "I thought it would be. That is Peace Rock. When the water level drops so far that Peace Rock can be seen, the Warden of the Water calls the water truce." "What truce?" Bagheera scowled, uneasy, wary of being lied to. "And what warden?" "Hathi, the leader of the elephants, is warden, and when he calls the truce, every animal may come and drink without fear of being mauled or eaten by his next-door neighbour." "Thank you, but why do you assume I do not already know?" "You are new to the jungle. You need to know the laws. The penalty for hunting anywhere during the truce is death." "How do you know I'm new to the jungle?" Bagheera squared his shoulders and tried to look as natural as possible up in his tree. He rearranged his paws so that they hung over the edge of the branch, swinging casually. "2 reasons. There has never yet been a panther as large as you, as tree root strong as you, as bird fast as you, so the jungle talks. Stories spread fast here." Bagheera tried very hard not to look pleased. He didn't succeed, not even slightly. "And you still smell of man. Your sister, I take it she is your sister, moves as if she is being watched, as if she still expects to be caught." Before Bagheera could say something rude in response, a sound rang out. "Listen," said the bear. "Do you hear that? That is Hathi." Hathi had only just taken on the chieftainship of his herd back then. His trumpet call was a little self-conscious and spittly towards the end, but even so it ran out across the jungle, and all who were alive enough to raise their heads heard it. "The elephants will keep the truce," said the old bear. He sighed. "It's a hard time for them." "Why?" The old bear smiled. "Elephants do not relish spending time with other jungle people. They keep to themselves. But they will set up station around the jungle to stop the tigers from tracking the deer on their way home from the watering hole." Bagheera returned to Gilari full of news. Then he drew up short, some inches from the cave. A jackal had its nose in the entrance. It looked disappointed. "Lady Panther, I will come around again in a day or two, I hope. If you are dead, you will not think it unneighbourly if I eat you." Bagheera felt a growl rise up from his stomach to his chest to his throat. He launched through the air and landed on the jackal's back, his claws digging deep into the creature's side. "Say that again," he growled, "and I will tear you apart." The jackal writhed in his claws. "It's the way of the jungle, it's the law." "It is my sister," said Bagheera. "Come here again and I'll crush your head in my jaws and leave your body for the vultures." "You cannot," jabbered the jackal. "You cannot kill. It is the truce. Remember the truce?" Bagheera unhooked his claws from the animal's flesh and battered him away. The jackal tumbled down the rock and took off as if 1,000 panthers were at his back. The jackal insisted for the rest of his life that a stripe of his yellow-brown fur had turned white with the shock of it. Nobody believed him. Jackals are not known to be truth-tellers. Bagheera squeezed into the cave, calling news of what the old bear had told him. Gilari lay on her side, panting as if she had run from end to end of the jungle floor. Her ribs showed through her dark coat. "Are you well, little sister?" asked Bagheera. "Very well, big brother," she said, but so quietly he could barely hear her. "I heard you with the jackal. It meant no harm." "No harm? It meant to eat you." "But not to kill me. When I'm dead, what will it matter?" The word struck at Bagheera like a python. "Not when, Gilari." She smiled at him and lay her head down on the earth. "All you need is some meat to wake you. It's not possible to feel hopeful on an empty stomach." She did not reply. Perhaps he thought she was asleep. Bagheera took off into the forest. It was as if he was possessed by the Dewani, the jungle madness that makes the jungle dwellers tear from tree to tree without reason or logic. He was the only fast-moving thing in sight. Everything else was drained by sun and drought. Bagheera was far into unfamiliar territory when he saw it, up high above his head on a ridge of rock, a skeleton. It had once been a buffalo, but a larger buffalo than Bagheera had ever seen. It must have slipped down the mountain and been able to get up or down. The birds had picked the bones clean. The skull, though, Bagheera could see the skull, and the meat inside remained untouched. A bird is not strong enough to crack open a buffalo skull. The only creature that can is a tiger, or an unusually strong panther. Bagheera sprang at the rock, flailed for a foothold and slid down again, his claws shrieking against the stone. He tried again, more cautiously, with the same result. There was no way up. Bagheera rocked back on his haunches. His whole body pulsed with the need for that skull. A vulture circled overhead. The birds, especially the kites and the vultures, suffered less painfully during the drought, for there was plenty of carrion, meat other animals could not touch without sickness. This particular vulture was positively fat, and its wing beat was strong. Bagheera called out to the vulture, "I need your help," and then he added, "Oh, my wide-winged friend," for he was learning how the jungle people spoke when they needed a favour, "I need that skull." "It would take 6 of us a good deal of effort to get that skull down to you," said the vulture. "I know, I would do it myself if I could." "If you say so, but what's in it for us?" asked the vulture. Another vulture flapped down and landed on the tree next to the first. "Yes, what will you do for us in return?" "I'll promise you a portion of my catch for the rest of my life," said Bagheera. He ducked as a third vulture swooped down. "I will leave the juiciest portion of every animal I slay until the day I die." "That's not much of a promise," said the third vulture. "You look too thin to survive more than a few days." "Then I promise you my own body when I am dead," said Bagheera. "We can have that anyway," said the vulture. "No offence, I hope," said the second vulture. "Just being practical," said the third. Bagheera dipped his great muzzle to the ground. He closed his eyes and forced himself not to growl, but to speak. "Then I promise you, I will break the truce taboo and kill for you." There was a stunned silence. The whole jungle seemed to throb and echo with his words. Then the second vulture asked, "Why not just do that now then and eat your kill? Why do you need us?" "I can't. She would never eat anything killed in that way. She knows about the truth and I must keep her alive." "Who?" The vulture's eyes lit up, and Bagheera did not like the particular shade of enthusiasm he saw in their eyes. "Nobody," said Bagheera. "Nobody who has any business with you." The vultures turned to each other and conferred, their wings hunched high over their heads. The first vulture turned back. "We've decided to agree," he said, "on the condition that you act fast once we've delivered the skull. Vultures don't enjoy waiting." "Yes," said Bagheera. "Fine. Anything. Please hurry." The second vulture gave a great squawk and the third beat its wings in the air. From the top of the mountain, the 3 new dots began to appear. Slowly they spiraled down to where the skeleton of the buffalo lay on the crop of rock. The other 3 vultures flew up, squawking instructions to each other and clashing wings in the sky. They brushed aside the bones of the buffalo and crowded around the horns. "2 on each horn?" "3 on each, fool. There are 6 of us." "Well, who are you calling fool?" "Concentrate, boy," said the first vulture. "I'm hungry." The vultures seized the horns in their talons. "And lift," called the first vulture. The 6 vultures rose almost in unison, and the skull rose up like some great sky monster with a wig of 12 wings flapping above it. The vultures flapped downwards, complaining about the weight. "Get your wing out of my beak! Why is your beak open in the first place?" They lowered the skull to Bagheera's paws. He seized it in his jaws and began to drag it, hefting it slowly over the dry, baked earth up towards his cave. The vultures followed overhead. He went backwards up the ridge of stone that led to the cave mouth, dragging the skull by its left horn. "Gilari," he called as he backed into the cave. "I have food. I have the most delicious food in the jungle." She was still asleep, lying in a pool of shadow. "Here," Bagheera set his jaw against the buffalo's bone. A panther has the strongest jaw of any jungle animal, but even so it was a great and painful effort to crack open the bone. At last, with a noise like a tree breaking in two, the skull broke open. The smell of meat filled the air. Bagheera took a mouthful and ran to Gilari's side. He deposited it in front of her mouth. "Here, eat, little sister." Gilari did not move. "Eat," he said more loudly. "Gilari, I have found the only meat in the jungle for you. Eat it." Gilari did not move. "Eat," he roared. "I have sworn to break the truce of the jungle for you. Eat it. Eat it." There was something about the way she lay, one paw under the other, that looked uncomfortable. Bagheera nudged Gilari with his nose, and then Bagheera rocked backwards, his whole body suddenly ice cold in the baking heat.